Steve Gamache here with another Chef Knives to Go quick look product review, and we are checking out a knife line with a ZDP-189 super steel composition. This is the Sukenari ZDP-189 Hairline Gyuto 240mm knife. And as mentioned, this knife line has a core steel of ZDP-189 powdered metallurgy stainless steel. This is one of the more recent generation super steels. It is expensive to manufacture, hence that contributes partly to the price of these line of knives. And it's got very, very high edge retention along with the ability to be heat treated to a high hardness. So these are in the 65-66 range of hardness, which is quite hard. And again, edge retention is outstanding on this line of knives. The construction is a softer stainless steel cladding on either side of that ZDP-189 core for a 3-layer sandwich. And the cladding, we'll get a closer look at it, but the box says Kasumi. Mark's Chef Knives to Go site says Hairline finish, but it's kind of a semi-polished finish with some vertical grind marks on it. So they've taken it to a little bit higher polish than a lot of knives would. The construction is outstanding on this knife. We'll get a close-up look at that. The weight on it is about 161 grams, 5.7 ounces, and the dimensions will vary slightly from knife to knife, but this one's about 232 millimeters on the edge, or a little over 9 inches, and the overall length about 15 inches on this knife. The spine thickness coming out of the handle above the back of the edge or chin is about 2.6 millimeters. And then one of the hallmarks of this line and this blade is the attention they pay to grinding the blade, and it's partly what you pay for. So you've got a consistent thickness and starts to thin down about halfway down the blade, and then just consistently gets a little bit thinner, a little bit thinner. That's called the distal taper, and it tapers down pretty consistently down towards the tip. So the tip's not super duper razor thin, but it does thin down nice and consistent all the way through to, good thinness for pretty good, I think it's quite outstanding performance at the tip. The height on this blade is about 49 millimeters, is slightly over that. And the handle is a classic presentation, a well-done handle of octagonal ambidextrous rosewood with a buffalo horn ferrule. And the handle circumference is about 3 inches. We're going to take a look at this handle from an end perspective, from the end cap perspective, but it's thinner on the width and thicker on the height. So it's the same circumference as a lot of other handles, but the other ones are a little more towards square on the rectangular side. This is definitely more rectangular. So it's just a little bit of a different feel. If you do a pinch grip, it really, for me, it wasn't a big deal just holding it a little bit. It's a little bit different feel if you're going to do a racket grip, but it's just slightly different proportions. Let's take a close-up look at this blade. The fit and finish is outstanding on these. The grind is very well done, as you might expect, and they've taken care to grind this blade really well. And you can just tell that time and effort and expertise has been put into this. So you've got some embossed kanji and the steel name on it, so you know what type of knife it is. You can see the finish on it, and then you can see the edge steel poking out from behind that cladding as we get towards the edge. It's a little hard to see. Again, it's kind of a semi-polished appearance, so it's a little hard to show in these lights, but I think you can see that core steel showing up. There's a fair amount of core steel showing, which means these are fairly thin behind the edge. Let's take a look. And you can see they thin out pretty nicely at the edge. They drop through food pretty well. The spine is nicely polished and a bit rounded, as is the relief on the back of the blade, known as the choil into the neck or imalto. And you might have just a tiny gap behind the imalto, known as the maki or machi, at the back, and that's kind of a classic presentation on the handle and stall. Here is the shape of the handle. Again, it's narrower and a little bit taller proportion-wise. And balance point on this knife is right at about the ZDP. And let's back off the focus here a little bit so we can bring our blade down. But it's right at about that ZDP. So it's almost on a pinch grip, at least for my hand. So this knife does have just a touch of weight to it. The blade is fairly thin and it's got a little bit of flex, but it's also a little stiffer than you might think given the thickness of it. And then you have just enough thickness on the spine to give you the ability to convex a little bit on the grind, which is outstanding. You're still going to get some product sticking just by the characteristic of the finish and being a fairly thin blade, but they do a good job on the convexing what material they do have to work with. Let's take a look at it on the cutting board. So here you have a really smooth profile, no bumps, no hiccups, as you might expect from a higher priced, higher echelon line of knives. So great grind job on this. Flows into just a touch of flat towards the heel. The 210 actually I just did a video on, as percentage-wise it is actually a larger flat spot. So these can vary just a tad from knife to knife. They're pretty consistent, but you'll get a little bit of variation on profile sometimes from knife to knife. So I can get about right there pretty high before I start hitting the tip into the cutting board. So it flows beautifully down into that kind of smaller flat spot. So if you want a knife with very high edge retention, great fit and finish, nice craftsmanship, and you want something that's maybe a little lower price and maybe not quite as ostentatious as the Sukenari ZDP Damascus line, this might be your blade. I think a lot of people are happy they came out with these because they can get the same basic knife, same geometry. I would think it's pretty close on performance, although I haven't used them side by side, in a little bit lower price package, maybe a little plainer presentation if that's what you're after. So here you have the Sukenari ZDP-189 Hairline or Kusumi Gyuto 240mm knife.